If there's one piece of music every gamer has heard and loves, I think it's probably fair to say that it's this. Now, if you don't know what this piece of music is, then I genuinely have no idea what you're doing watching this video. I mean, thank you. But if you don't know, it's from Halo. And Halo is a giant of a franchise, a pillar of first-person shooters, a universe spanning multiple mediums, games, TV shows, comics, books, full of brilliant storytelling, characters that we love, and big, scary aliens going. Now, I love Halo. It's probably the franchise that I've sunk the most time into, whether that's playing, whether it's reading or watching. And I genuinely believe that one of the key contributing factors for this is its musical identity and the sound world that it inhabits. I am the Rambling Man. I ramble on about things that I love, so please join me as we look back at Halo Combat Evolved with a key focus on the music and the sound world, with the goal of trying to pin down exactly why I think it achieves so much. So, without further ado, let's ramble on. How can we start with anything but that opening? When you boot up the original game, not so much with the Master Chief Collection, which is what I'll be using purely to make my life a little bit easier, the first thing that you are greeted with is this scene and this music. A massive floating ring in space, accompanied by Gregorian chant. This instantly evokes a sense of scale, of mystery, and of time. Now here is a quote from Marty O'Donnell himself, the composer who came up with the theme.
Gregorian chants always sound ancient.
Yes.
As soon as Joe Staten said to me, yeah, we need music that makes you feel ancient, epic, and mysterious, I'm like, okay, ancient, I'll do Gregorian chant. Yeah. I mean, it was like, it was so fast, I didn't even think twice about it.
Gregorian chant is such a unique sound. It sounds ancient, old, from a different time, well, because it is. And that feeling is partially, mainly actually, down to its musical properties. Gregorian chant is often modal, opposed to being in a major or a minor key, something that in today's more popular music is not used as much. In case you're wondering, the Halo theme is in the Dorian mode, a mode that resonates as melancholic, but in a hopeful way. I'll play it on a piano so you can hear what I'm talking about. So here is D major. Here is D minor. And here is Dorian mode. I think this melody sounds almost reflective, thoughtful, charged with a melancholy, and this is because of its resistance to keep to a consistent tempo, a device that's often used in Gregorian chant. It is flexible, not to a ridiculous extent, we can still see where it's going, but it does take its time. It pulls the tempo around, which puts the listener on edge. It sounds different. We haven't even started the game yet. We've only heard the first phrase, and I'm already gushing over its musical brilliance. Ooh. So now, after this serene, magical opening, what does Marty and Michael Salvatore decide to do next? Come in hard with that tribal percussion. Remember guys, we're playing a game, A game where you run around as a badass super soldier killing aliens, driving tanks and generally blowing shit up. We don't spend long admiring and gawping over the majesty and scale of Halo. We're human beings, baby. We don't care what it is. We're gonna get in there. We're gonna sort it out. We're gonna do what needs to be done. The music is heavy. The cello and bass line grounds us. It drives us along with that ostinato. The violins soaring overhead. I see this as the musical depiction of humanity in this game on the ring. The military might, the hope and drive to survive. It's powerful, it's inspiring, just like Master Chief himself. This whole opening track reflects the core philosophy of the game itself. There are moments where you have time to take in where you are, reflect on the beauty of the game's setting. But this wouldn't be Halo if you didn't have those bombastic and fun moments. But these two states of being are not mutually exclusive. This is one of my favourite moments of the track, where you have those chants coming back in over the punctuated string bass line. The ancient, the ethereal, meets the grounded and bombastic to create a completely new texture. It's just like what you do when you play the game. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. Now, I could go through every single piece of music in the Halo CE soundtrack and dissect the musical structure and melodies, but I think that would take far too long. I'm not used to writing scripts for videos. I'm not used to making these sort of videos, so I don't really want to bite off more than I can chew. However, if you haven't picked it up by now, I love this soundtrack. So I want to focus less on how good the music itself is, because I think I've kind of shown that I just love that. And I want to focus more on how the music is used in the story and in the gameplay, because I believe that this is going to show how the soundtrack elevates the game and gives it the atmosphere that it truly deserves. There is a big difference between films and games when it comes to the dynamic between the audience and the media itself. When you watch a film, you are witnessing a story, but you are watching other people, whether that be the characters or the actors, experience that story, affect that story, change that story. You are passive in your consumption of that content. Video games, however, create a vastly different relationship between the audience and the media as you are stepping into the world on the screen. You have a more active relationship with the media, moving through it, experiencing the story for yourself. And so, there needs to be much more emphasis on the music and sound design to immerse you, the player, into the game. Even during cutscenes, when the relationship between audience and media flips back to the same as if you were watching a film rather than playing a game, the mood and the atmosphere needs to entice the player so that they are excited to get back into playing and exploring what they have just seen. Halo soundtrack has a beautiful way of setting the mood for the player, setting up the world so that the player is interested in exploring that world. It's a masterclass of how to use composition and arrangement to complement what is going on screen. To show this, let's start at the very beginning. The very first cutscene in the Halo franchise is of the Pillar of Autumn floating through space, moving towards the Halo ring. It starts on a pretty sour note, with Captain Keyes and Cortana discussing the Autumn's escape from Reach, their jump to slip space, and how they've been followed by the Covenant, by the aliens that want them dead.
Cortana, all I need to know is did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.
The situation seems pretty hopeless. We, as the Watchers, don't know who the Covenant are yet, but from the tone and the sound of the music itself, we can sense that danger. The slow and droning strings was a beautiful musical choice here. The top violin line is sustained whilst the chord underneath changes, which pulls our focus to the top of that musical layer. It feels weightless, mimicking the autumn floating through the vacuum of space. Paired up with the dialogue here, there is a hopelessness that permeates throughout this scene. Captain Keyes knows that this is going to be a fight for their lives and that they could very well lose. Notice the absence of any rhythmic drive here. It is all just strings moving chord by chord. And then we get to this.
I want everyone at their station.
Everyone, sir?
Everyone. And Cortana. Let's give our old friend a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
We now see the Pillar of Autumn's military gearing up. We cut to Sergeant Johnson doing his thing, commanding the room, hyping up the Marines. We see tanks, we see pelicans, suddenly punctuated by this military drumbeat. This is a call to action. This is a call to the player to get ready to fight. We know what's at stake. We know the situation is dire, but we are engulfed by the atmosphere of defiance, of survival. We know what we need to do, and we get ready to do it.
You heard the lady. Move like you got a purpose.
We get so much of the atmosphere, so much of the feeling. We get so much personality of the people we can see on the screen just from the music. Look, that's 2 scenes. I mean, 1 scene, really. 2 pieces of music, and already you're seeing how Halo can weave feeling into its cutscenes. We're not even at the gameplay yet, and it is enticing us to play because we know what we're getting into. We know what world we want to step into, and we know where our place is. And it is very, very nice. But then we get to Chief's introduction. Our main protagonist, the player, the hope of humanity. In a lesser game, you'd expect some huge fanfare to play as he comes into frame. But that's the opposite of what we get. Instead, the chants come back. And that's it. Even the drums have stopped. Chief is most definitely human, but he is being treated as though he is as mysterious and as epic as Halo. Now, you might say that I'm looking into things far too much here, but just hear me out. The musical language used to represent the Forerunners in the Halo franchise is comprised of the Gregorian chant and choral singing. We've already seen this from the title sequence, but this idea is punctuated many more times during the rest of the franchise.
Say what?
So this is what my father found. I thought Halo was some sort of super weapon.
It is. If activated, this ring will cause destruction on a galactic scale.
I want all the information you've got on the first Halo. Schematic, topography, whatever. I don't care if I have the clearance or...
Now, I believe that the decision to have this style of music play as we're introduced to Master Chief, the main protagonist of the Halo franchise, could be a musical nod to the fact that the human race was deemed worthy by the Forerunners to inherit the mantle of responsibility. 343 Guilty Spark calls Chief Reclaimer. So the seeds of this story are in the first game. So I don't think that it's too far-fetched. This is the kind of detail that elevates Halo's music to a new level, because it makes the player want to listen, as we are gaining information by just using our ears. The music itself is teaching us things about the world that we are watching and are inhabiting, and that is awesome. Now, I think that there are 4 different musical feelings, arrangements that Marty and Michael use to create the sound world of Halo, each of which corresponds to one of the 4 factions that we come across in the first game. You've got the choral, the electronic, the orchestral, and the contemporary. The choral obviously corresponds to the Forerunners. The electronic corresponds to the Covenant. The orchestral corresponds to humanity. The contemporary, more modern sound world corresponds to the Flood. This keeps the game's music fresh and new, as you come across new sound worlds depending on where you are in the game. It also keeps the player's ears in tune and ready, as the music itself can inform them as to what they might be coming up against within the level itself. It's always so obvious when you're going up against the Flood, as you have those shrieks and dissonant chords from the strings. It's just, you go, okay, I'm fighting the Flood today, let's get ready to get my assault rifle out. Obviously, we are playing as the Master Chief, so we are experiencing these other musical styles through the lens of humanity. So we inevitably keep coming back to the more grounded, orchestral style of music. You can see this by looking at the use of the main theme in the game. Throughout the game, we hear the string section of the main theme come back in various forms. Here are some examples. There's an amazing variation used in a rock anthem to save the world. There's a version where the string part is used as a contrary motion groove in Perilous Journey. And a high energy variation of the main theme in On a Pale Horse. Actually, if you just listen to the whole soundtrack, you'll see that Marty was damn happy with that opening track, with so many different aspects of it creeping their way into other tracks in the game. And this works as a musical device. Not only does it work on a satisfactory level, as we, as the audience, hear these various catchy motifs being played around with over the course of the gameplay, but it also works on a narrative level, as it acts as an audible reminder of where we are. Dynamic music is one of the biggest parts of video game music that separates it from other genres. The ability to hear the music be influenced by the gameplay will always make the player feel a sense of immersion and influence in what they are playing that can't be recreated in any other medium. When used effectively, it can also give the music itself longevity, allowing it to shift and change so it doesn't get stale, meaning that repeat playthroughs don't leave the player with a resentment of the soundtrack. Halo's music uses vertical layering. This means that each piece of music is constructed, well, vertically, with each line in the arrangement being recorded separately. These are called stems. The beauty of this is that the composer can add or remove each stem at will, playing around with the arrangement on the fly. And so when this is applied to the game itself, the developers can assign certain arrangements to different sections of the game. This allows the music to grow and shrink depending on the player's actions. It also allows the composer to come up with different variations of themes to be used in different scenarios. At the end of The Silent Cartographer, this insanely cool variation of the main theme plays. It starts with the percussion and the bass string stem that has been heard multiple times before. But then out of nowhere, this epic guitar comes blaring in. As you ascend back to the surface, you can hear the arrangement changing dynamically as you move, which keeps the intensity but adds sonic variation to the music. Then, when you get to the last door, the music is then rounded off, finishing the loop it is in, and buttoned by a clash of a cymbal, signalling to the player that they've done it, they're out. This is a great example of vertical layering being used in game. You start off with a stem that you've heard before, you know it well, but then they start building on different stems, different feelings, a different texture, and as you play through this level, you get variety, built upon something you know, but it's different, and it's fun, and it makes the game more engaging, and you feel like as you're progressing, the music is progressing with you, and I think it's just brilliant. The Halo soundtrack also incorporates many cues for music to play as soon as something happens on screen, so as to inform the player. For example, there are many times where this musical sting is played when hunters enter a firefight, which instantly informs the player that trouble has arrived. The game is full of moments like this that make the soundtrack feel alive as it responds to what's on screen. Here are some examples.
Amigos, found them. I'm on it.
When developing the first Halo game, the game designers at Bungie focused on the golden triangle. What this means is that Halo's combat loop is driven by the three most important pillars: your weapon, your grenades, and your melee. And the idea is that you are able to do all three rapidly whilst moving. Now, I think that we could zoom out and apply this idea of the golden triangle to Halo's core game design as a whole, with these three pillars being gameplay, art design, and sound. I focus purely on the sound and music in this video, but there are plenty of other videos out there that focus on gameplay and art design. And this is the importance that I believe Marty and Michael Salvatore placed on their soundtrack. It needed to be a core pillar to the game, and later the franchise. And I think they succeeded. In this video, I set to pinpoint why I think Halo CE's soundtrack is so phenomenal, and I think that I've managed to do so. The music itself is fantastically composed and arranged, but more importantly, it is used in a way that enhances the overall gaming experience. It has parallels to the game's narrative themes. It successfully sets up the game's world and atmosphere. It informs the player through its arrangements and implementation, and it has a dynamic soundtrack that changes and morphs as the player moves through the game. I encourage you all to play Halo CE. Turn down the in-game sound so that you can really hear the music over everything else, and just play through the game. You start to really notice the love and care that has been put into the soundtrack, and I bet that you'll come out of it with a new appreciation of the brilliant music that Marty and Michael wrote for this game. Thank you for listening. I have been wanting to make a video about Halo for a while now, and I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I hope to make some more videos in the future, so until then, take care.